So excited right now about bringing our next guest on the program. In fact, he's got a new book out. Here it is. Minor League Baseball fans, you're going to love this. The best little baseball town in the world, the Crowley Millers, and minor league baseball in the 1950s. And it's not just if you're a minor league baseball fan. If you're a baseball fan, you're going to love this. Last time we had Gaylon White in the on the show, he was in our Lubingo studios. Today we get to join him via Zoom as he is with us right now on the program. Gaylon, welcome back to the show. Great to have you, and congratulations on the new book.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to be back.
I know for you, writing about minor league baseball, really in the, and you can say the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s is something that you've had a chance to do over your last, your last few books. And it's so interesting because when I look at what you've been writing about, and we've seen really the theme of some of these books here, Galen. I wasn't expecting the Crowley Millers to be a profile, but when you get into the book, you realize soon that this is what small town professional baseball was all about, right?
It was, and it shows the importance of small town America to baseball at that time. You only had up until expansion in 1961, you only had 16 major league teams. But then you had all these minor league teams. At its apex, you had 59 leagues and more than 400 teams. That was in 1949. By 1959, the number of leagues was down to 21, and you had 156 teams. So the 50s saw a shrinkage. At the same time, you saw some really fine baseball in the minor leagues with some veteran players mixed in with young players.
Tell me what it was about this particular team and this story that really attracted you to want to write a book about them.
In some respects, this book is a fluke because I wasn't planning on writing about Crowley, Louisiana, because I didn't know where Crowley, Louisiana was. I was interviewing a pitcher named Hugh Blanton, and Hugh had been twice a 20-game winner for the Amarillo Gold Sox. But prior to that, in 1952, he won 20 games for the Crowley Millers. And I was interviewing Hugh about another ball player. And he then asked me near the end of our conversation, have you ever heard of a player named Conk Merriweather? I had not. Then he described Conk as the sorriest human being he had ever seen, but also the greatest minor league hitter he had ever seen. Well, that got my curiosity going. I set out to find out more about Conk Merriweather. In the process, I learned about Crowley, Louisiana. And one of the first things I heard was all roads pass through Crowley, Louisiana. So here's a town I'd never heard of, and now I hear all roads pass through Crowley. And I'm told about JFK and Jackie coming through Crowley in 1959 and drawing crowds of like 90,000 people in downtown. Babe Ruth visiting there in 1921 with the Yankees for an exhibition game. So it really was true. And they also had a bus station where they had some great biscuits that Little Richard, the rock and roller, would often stop at and gorge himself with biscuits. So that really made me curious to know more about Crowley, Louisiana.
As you started to dive deeper and deeper into the story, which became the best little baseball town in the world, what was it about the community and the love affair with this team that just impressed you so much?
It was a love affair, is what I discovered. The fans fell in love with the players, and the players who had never heard of Crowley, like me, they fell in love with the people of Crowley. They were treated like heroes. One of the players said, what the New York Yankees are to New York, the Crowley Millers are to Crowley. The ball players called Crowley the nice capital of America. Its official name was the rice capital of America. So there was this love affair between the fans and the players. For 3 straight years, this is in the early 50s, the Crowley Millers attracted crowds of over 100,000 each season. Now, this is pretty remarkable because in that part of the country, they have a lot of rainouts. In fact, one year they had some 20 rainouts and had to make them up as double hitters. So to attract over 100,000 fans 3 straight years, one year as many as 120,000 fans. One sports writer calculated that was the equivalent of the New York Yankees drawing 80 million fans to Yankee Stadium.
How many fans did the ballpark hold back in those days?
There were approximately 2,000 for one
Wow.
game in 1952. This was a car night. Now, oftentimes they would give away free cars at these ball games. One season they gave away 7 cars, but one night in 1952 they had over 7,000 fans in this ballpark. They were about 10 deep around the outfield, and then they were crowded around the third baseline. The center fielder for the opposing team looked around and said, "Where in the hell these fans come from?" They'd had so many fans that the ballpark is in the rice area where the rice mills are. And so trains that would come into the rice mills would come right near the ballpark. Fans would park on the railroad tracks, and they would announce during the game, there's a car blocking the railroad tracks, please move it. This was over the public address system. So there was all sorts of things like that happened in this ballpark that made it quite unusual.
That is pretty wild. As we're talking to Gaylon White in the new book right now, The Best Little Baseball Town in the World, the Crowley Millers in minor league baseball in the 1950s, which is just out from Gaylon here this summer from Roman and Littlefield Books. So as you talked about something a moment ago, giving away cars, I was reading over the last few months, Veck is in Rec, because I never had a chance to really dive into that book on Bill Veck. And he mentioned giving away cars in minor league baseball, in major league baseball. That was a popular thing. And they gave away a horse. They gave away furniture and all this stuff. I mean, it sounds ridiculous today because, now we go and we're lucky if we get bobbleheads at a minor league game or T-shirts or some other kind of giveaway like we normally see. But can you imagine winning 7 cars over the course of one night, giving those away? I mean, Gaylon, it just doesn't even sound real when you're talking about what these teams were doing back then.
Well, this speaks to the community spirit. I don't really think that they had to give away all the cars. It was the only game in town. Remember, there was no television early on. It was just discovering Crowley, not until about 1954, which was they topped 100,000, 51, 52, and 53. 54 is when they dipped down below it. That's about when they started to get fairly decent TV reception in Crowley. Also, air conditioning. So the two things that affected minor league baseball throughout the country, air conditioning and radio, impacted Crowley. In addition to that, Little League Baseball started to make some inroads in the middle 50s. So you had towns like my last book, I write about Roswell, New Mexico, which had a Little League World Series champion in 1956. Well, that took all the glory away from their minor league baseball team at that time. So Crowley was, this was the only game in town. And again, they loved the players and the players loved them. It put Crowley on the map. So the pride that they had was tremendous. And still to this day, I've been there for 2 book signings, and their pride in that team, in that era, is still there.
How would you describe the level of play? Would you say it was like A ball, double A? Where would you describe the quality of baseball back then?
Today's level, I would say about double A, because you had a mixture of rookie players with veteran players. Their star player, who I mentioned early on, Conk Merriweather, was a 4-time minor league home run champion. He actually went to spring training with the Cardinals in 1946. And it was sometime after that he had some health issues, nervous breakdown, some issue that eventually led to some problems after baseball, which I write about in the book.
One of the greatest names ever, Conk. Let's be honest. We never hear about a young superstar named Conk these days in baseball.
No, you don't. Conklin was the first name, and he was an eccentric left-hander, and I say eccentric because he started out as a pitcher. Mm-hmm. And he would come from the bullpen to the pitcher's mound doing cartwheels. That's how he warmed up. So he was different from the very beginning. He was such a good hitter, they converted him to the outfield. Now, he was in the Cardinals organization where they had great success converting another left-hander to the left-handed pitcher to the outfield, and that was Stan Musial. So here comes Conklin Merriweather in 46, and he tore it up in spring training, but he had never played much first base, and that's where the Cardinals wanted to play him. So he wound up playing in Houston. Now, he was hitting .333 at Houston, and suddenly he drops off the radar. Now, the reports he had a nervous breakdown. There was another report that at one point he held his teammates at gunpoint. He was, as the Hugh Blanton described to me, a sorry human being. After baseball, a year after leaving baseball, he killed his mother-in-law with an axe. So that's the story of Conk Merriweather. And I try not to let that overshadow the story of baseball in Crowley,
Right.
because Crowley became known as the best little baseball town in the world because of its attendance figures. And they had a number of other colorful players who didn't go around knocking off other people.
Did they ever have any players that were as close as Conk was to getting to the big leagues?
Well, one did, and he was a character too. Another eccentric left-hander, George Brunette. George Brunette is featured in Jim Bouton's Ball Four. They had a conversation as to why Bouton didn't wear underwear, and probably Sports Illustrated called George Brunette as the greatest left-handed pitcher who never wore a jock and a cup. He holds the record for minor league strikeouts. He won 77 games in the majors. He pitched for 9 different major league teams, 32 teams overall. So George Brunette would be a great left-hander. In fact, somebody said he had such a strong left arm, he never dropped a beer.
As far as this book goes, what is like, you've already done 2 sightings in Crowley. What would you say is your biggest takeaway from this book? Something that you feel really good about after writing it that you wouldn't have really understood prior to?
The last book, Steve, that we discussed was Left on Base in the Bush Leagues. And in that book, I write about baseball in Artesia and Roswell, New Mexico, and La Mesa, Texas. Then I realized just how much of a love affair the small towns of America had with baseball. They still have that pride in baseball today. And that pride's still there. And I found the same thing in Crowley, Louisiana, and New Iberia, Louisiana, where I write about a couple of the players there. And so what it's left me to believe in is that Major League Baseball has lost that connection with small town America. Mm-hmm. And the fans in these small towns, they're rooting more for their college team or the Little League teams or the American Legion team. They're not following Major League Baseball. And so I believe Major League Baseball has the opportunity to reconnect with these small towns. And the way to do it is to play in some of these historical ballparks. Miller Stadium in Crowley is still there. In fact, during the pandemic, it was refurbished, new field, new seats, new lighting. It would be great to have a barnstorming team or a Major League team go in and play in Crowley or some of your other small towns, Artesia, New Mexico, Roswell.
You mentioned Babe Ruth did it in 1921. He was there in Crowley then. It would be great if we were able to get a group of players today, because they obviously don't need the money, but they would decide, you know what, for just the love of the game and for a chance to play against communities like they did, 70, 80, 100 years ago, do the barnstorming trips again around small town America. I think that would be phenomenal. And I hope we could eventually find 10 or 15 guys that would want to do that during an off season.
When my first book, The Bilko Athletic Club, somebody said to me, the best era of baseball is when we're a kid. And what's happening is that Major League Baseball is not connecting with kids as they once did. And because kids are not able to see them unless they go to one of these big towns and pay with their parents the huge prices, they don't get to see Major League Baseball. So let's take Major League Baseball or some aspect of it to these smaller towns and play in some historic stadiums where you want to celebrate the roots, the history of baseball. And I think that would have a tremendous effect on the popularity of baseball, which I think has a PR problem.
I'm with you on that one. Again, the book, The Best Little Baseball Town in the World, the Crowley Millers and minor league baseball in the 1950s. It's from Gaylon White. Gaylon, what is the best way our listeners can pick up a copy of this book? What do you recommend the most?
Go to my website, GaylonWhiteBaseball.com, click on the orders page, and then there'll be a form from the publisher, Roman and Littlefield, offering a 30% discount. And that'd take the price down around $26. That's a good deal. It's better than Amazon. If you want to go Amazon route, fine. You'll pay the list price.
Otherwise, GaylonWhiteBaseball.com.
That's correct.
Great stuff. Great to visit with you again. Have a great summer, and I'll look forward to the next time we get to chat with you on the show here, Gaylon.
Thanks, Steve. Always a pleasure.